This video is going to introduce a new inheritance pattern called multiple alleles. So just a review of the two that we've looked at so far, we had Mendelian inheritance, or complete dominance, that had two possible alleles, and that led to just two possible phenotypes, either the dominant phenotype or the recessive phenotype. Then we had codominance, which again there was just two possible alleles, but both of them were dominant. So that resulted in three possible phenotypes. So again, just like with when we introduced codominance, there are some traits where there are many more than three phenotypes that exist. So we obviously are still missing some inheritance patterns. So multiple alleles is one of those. So multiple alleles is exactly what it sounds like. In multiple alleles, we have more than two alleles. So the number of possible alleles that exist are more than two, or equal to, or more than three. So there has to be at least three alleles. However, or we'll say at least three. Any individual, as we saw with Mendelian inheritance and with codominance, every individual only has two alleles. So even though there may be more than three out there, there could be, hundreds out there potentially, every individual only has two of those, of whatever possibilities exist. And that means for phenotypes, there's going to be at least three different phenotypes, potentially more. So one classic example of multiple alleles is blood type in humans. Now, when you hear people talk about their blood type, they talk about A, B, ABO, and they also talk about this positive negative thing. We're not going to worry about the positive negative thing here. We're just going to talk about the ABO part. So the ABO part is an example of multiple alleles because there are three different alleles that you can have. There's an A allele, there's a B allele, and there's an O allele. Now the thing with multiple alleles, because every individual only has two of those alleles have to interact with each other in one of the two ways that we learned before, either with a codominant recessive pattern, a complete dominant recessive pattern, or a codominant recessive pattern. So think about there's being three different alleles here. The possible combinations we can have are two A's, an A and a B, two B's, two O's, an A and O, or a B and an O. That's all the possible ways that we could put these two alleles together for an individual to have two of those. Now, we need to have some information about how those O's and A's and B's, those different alleles, interact with each other. And here, A and B happen to be dominant alleles. So A and B are dominant alleles. And O is a recessive allele. So what that means is that AA would obviously be expressing the phenotype for A. AB would express the phenotype for both A and B. BB would express the phenotype for just B. O, since there is no other letter, would express the phenotype for O. And AO, since A is dominant and O is recessive, would express the phenotype A. And BO, since B is dominant and O is recessive, would express the phenotype B. So we have some codominance going on here with A and B, and we have some dominant recessive going on with A and O and B and O here. So multiple alleles, we can see a combination of both of our two inheritance patterns that we've learned already interacting. So just like with codominance, we noted that one way that this is often represented is there's a single letter used, and then the particular allele that's attached to that is written as a subscript up above, or superscript up above that. And that helps indicate that we are indeed talking about just blood type. If we used I for blood type and then put a A or I with a B, And the way that they indicate that O is recessive is that they use a lowercase I for the O allele. However, just like with codominance, that makes things more confusing, at least in my mind. So I like to just stick with a capital A for the A allele, a capital B for the B allele, and a lowercase o for the O allele to demonstrate that A and B are dominant alleles and O is a recessive allele. Now, a little bit about the phenotypes here. The phenotype we're actually talking about is if we think about somebody's red blood cell here, they have specific antigens that are present, which are just proteins that are on the surface of them. So we're really talking about, as a phenotype, a particular protein that's on the surface. So we can refer to that phenotype as their blood type. We can talk about someone with type A, type B, type AB, or type O blood, and that refers to the particular proteins they have on their blood. So someone with type A blood would have a lot of those A proteins on them. Obviously, they wouldn't, actually look like an A, but we could represent it like that. And someone with type B blood would have a lot of these B proteins on the surface of their cell. Someone with type AB blood would have both A's and B's on the surface of their cell. And someone with type O blood wouldn't have any of those proteins on their surface of their cell. And that's actually why someone with type O blood can't get a transfusion from any of the other blood types, because their body will see those antigen proteins and reject it. Whereas someone with type AB blood could get a blood transfusion from anybody else, because their body would knows how to recognize both the A proteins and the B proteins, and it could be a successful transplant. So let's fill in here the different blood types that exist. We have blood type A, blood type B, blood type AB, and blood type O. And the possible genotypes someone could have: for A, they could be either AA or AO. For B, they could be BB, or they could be BO. AB, they can only have the genotype AB, and OO, blood type O, they can only have the genotype lowercase o, lowercase o.